Fine. So let's, as mentioned, let's first focus on Chanukah and some of the vital lessons that I think we each should draw from Chanukah, especially during these trying times. So just a quick background. Chanukah, as we all know, celebrates the defeat of the Maccabees over the Greeks in the year 164 BCE, to be exact. Antiochus V, who was the Greek emperor of the time, not only took control of the whole land of Israel, but he also imposed these terrible decrees that sought to squash Judaism, if not to extinguish it altogether. And he did so in the most violent and vicious of ways. Jews who were caught practicing Judaism were not just murdered, but they were butchered. To give you a very graphic example, not that I want to give you any nightmares, but for example, if a woman was caught circumcising her son, as is the mitzvah at the age of 8 days old, the Greeks would take that baby, tie the baby to his mother's back, and then slash the two together. Those were the enemies we faced in the year 164 CE. To put it in a historical perspective, if the Greeks had been successful, God forbid, not only would there not be any Judaism, but there wouldn't be Christianity, there wouldn't be Islam, the two daughter religions of Judaism, as they call them. So this was really not just tyranny on a grand scale, but also a threat to humanity altogether. Thank God the Maccabees had the incredible courage and faith to face the Greeks, even though they were much more numerous than them. The Greeks were much more numerous than the Maccabees, even though they were more skilled than them, even though their army was at least 20 times bigger than the Maccabees. Just put it in perspective. The Maccabees still, with conviction and determination, faced the Greeks battle after battle after battle, and eventually they were able to win this very physical war. But it wasn't just a physical war. As the very end, the culmination of this war demonstrates, it was also a very spiritual war. It was a war in which the Maccabees sought not just to reconquer Israel, but also to ensure that the temple, the Jerusalem temple, that was under threat during Greek times, was also going to shine again, not just shine physically, but shine with all of its values. And therefore, it was very important for the Maccabees that at the culmination of this war, they didn't just go and parade the streets to demonstrate the victory, but that they went first and foremost to rededicate the temple. A temple which was, by the way, filled with Zeus idols, filled with prostitutes, filled with all sorts of horrible things. And they cleaned it up. And then in order to make that temple shine again, they sought to light the menorah. And that's the miracle that everyone knows about. They could not find a cruse of olive oil that was sealed, needed to be sealed. If it was open, meant that it became impure by the Greeks. So they couldn't, there were many open cruses of olive oil. Many. It's not that they couldn't find any olive oil, as people think. They could. It was all over the place, but all of these cruses were open. And having them open means that they were impure, so they couldn't use them to light the menorah. They needed pure olive oil, or not just pure, with physically with the ingredients, but pure spiritually. So they were looking for a cruse of olive oil that was sealed, looking and looking and looking until they find one that was supposed to have enough olive oil for the candle to shine bright over one day or 24 hours. And as we all know, the miracle happened that it lasted for 8 days, with the menorah now shining bright and the temple being rededicated and the values of the temple being now disseminated all across Israel. The victory was complete. And this is really what we are celebrating on Chanukah. Now, we can go more into the details. If you have more questions afterwards, please feel free to ask them. But I want to draw really 4 brief lessons that I think are very, very relevant today from the story of Chanukah. The first lesson is a lesson we've shared in the past, but it's based on the obvious question of why is Chanukah celebrated during 8 days? Because if you think about this, it should be celebrated for 7 days. Why am I saying that? Because as we just said, if the 8-day celebration is based on the menorah lighting for 8 days, the first day shouldn't be counted. The first day, it was a natural occurrence that the menorah was on for a day. They expected it. They had enough olive oil for the menorah to be lit for one day. So deduct that one day, which is natural and not miraculous, from the 8 days. Let's celebrate Hanukkah for 7 days, therefore, not 8 days. Get the question? And I know we want an extra day of gelt and an extra day of donuts, and an extra day of all the good presents, etc. But still, but the answer, I believe, speaks to a miracle that is very often overlooked. And that's the mere miracle that the Maccabees, walking into this temple and finding complete chaos and desecration, they find resilience within themselves to look for a cruse of olive oil. Most of us would have walked into such a scene and said, oh, it's going to take us years to rebuild. We're not going to take care of this now. Let's just celebrate our military victory and move on. But no, not the Maccabees. They knew that the spiritual victory was as important as the military victory. So they found that resilience within themselves to rededicate the temple. That ought to be celebrated. And therefore, we celebrate Hanukkah for 8 days. The first day being a strong reminder that no victory over evil forces can be complete if we don't have the courage and the strength and the resilience within ourselves to also fight that spiritual war. I think this is a very relevant message for today. Yes, we are fighting a very physical war in Gaza over the forces of evil, but at the end of the day, this is also a spiritual war. These evil forces don't just want to kill us physically, they want to kill us spiritually. It's clear to all. They attacked us on October 7th on Simchat Torah. They didn't pick just a random day. They picked a day that represents the soul of the Jewish people, a soul of joy and of passion. So this is also a spiritual war. And therefore, in order to truly win this war, it's not enough for the IDF to win this war, which in Mitzvah Hashem they will. We must also participate in this war in a spiritual way and add mitzvahs, add good deeds, and most importantly, just like the Maccabees, find the strength and courage and resilience within our hearts to be as Jewish as we can and as illuminating as we can. So that's lesson 1 from Chanukah. Lesson 2 from Chanukah, I derive from the dreidel. You all play the dreidel? Yeah? Okay. So if you play the dreidel, you know that it's not such an educational game. Think about this. I mean, we teach it to our children, but since when do we teach our children to gamble? That's what it is. Let's gamble on a letter. If it falls on Gimel, you'll win. If it falls on Shin, then not only will you win, but you'll lose a whole bunch of, what is it you play with? Beans? Money? Candy? So you'll lose a whole bunch of chocolate coins. Is that a good educational toy and game for our children? So why are we teaching it? Why? I mean, so the historic idea is because when the Greeks imposed their decrees on the Jewish people, they still, with tremendous risks, continued to study Torah, and they would go out to the fields, and when no one was watching them, they would take out the books and study Torah. But they would have one Jew stand out outside of the group and make sure that no Greek is coming close. And when the Greeks would come, then that Jew would turn to their groups and say, hide the books, hide the books. We're not studying Torah. As Greek soldiers are coming, let's take out our dreidels and let's show them that we're not learning Torah, but instead we're playing dreidel. And therefore, we play the dreidel. But it's not enough of a good reason to corrupt, so to speak, our youth with a game of gambling. But the deeper answer is really we're teaching our children something else. And we're teaching our children that life also is one big gamble, one big dreidel game. That yes, there are things that we are in control of, but there are things that we are completely not in control of. October 7th, we weren't in control of. Maybe the Israeli army or the intelligence might have had some control, but it happened. We here in Scottsdale certainly had no control of. And this is on a global scale, but also on an individual scale. There are things that will happen to you today that you may have not been in control of. It doesn't have to be bad things. Maybe you'll be stuck in traffic. It's becoming more and more of an occurrence here in Scottsdale with more and more people moving here. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe your dinner won't come out as cooked as you wanted it to come out. There are things that we are not in control of. The big question, though, is how do we react to those parts of our lives that we weren't in control of? And yeah, what we're teaching our children is that regardless whether life brings you to a gimel, or life brings you to a shin, celebrate that game. Be in a Chanukah atmosphere. And remember that at the end of the day, it's only a game. And this is really what life is all about. Let's celebrate even those moments that we didn't expect or that surprised us even in a negative way. Because there's a Chanukah moment there, a moment of blessing, a moment in which God whispers, I'm here with you. You, the Maccabee, will win. And this was really their approach. Look, they had to do, the Maccabees had to do what they had to do. They knew that many things were outside of their control. Will the Greeks overpower them because they could? They had a bigger army. That's outside of our control. But we have to do what we have to do. And when you do what you have to do, and you rely on God for the rest, for God to come through, then your whole life turns into one big, delicious game of Grado. That's the message that comes from this important game. That's lesson number 2. Lesson number 3 comes from the oil. So as you may know, the best material to use for the lighting of the menorah is olive oil. Why? Because that's the type of material they used in the temple. That's what we're celebrating, right? We just said that the miracle was that a jar of olive oil lasted for 8 days instead of 1 day. So they used olive oil. So that's why it's better to use olive oil. If you don't have olive oil, it's fine. You can use canola oil or grapeseed oil or vegetable oil or whatever else. What? For the menorah. If you don't have that type of oil, you can use wax oil or beeswax oil or beeswax candles or whatever as something that lights. But it's better to use olive oil. Why? Not just because this was the material that was used in the Jerusalem temple, but because oil is a very powerful message. I think a message that sounds very loudly, especially today. And that is that oil, if you think about this, is the only material that cannot be mixed fully with other materials, with other liquids, right? If you mix, I don't know, water and vinegar, they'll mix fully. But water and oil won't. Oil will always float atop. Can't mix with other liquids. And this is the message, that regardless of how many floods try to what's the word? Inundate us. Thank you. Inundate us in the world or in our lives. If we can shine, if we can be olive oils, we'll always end up at the top. And that's really what we are teaching our children too, especially nowadays. Yes, October 7th again wasn't expected. And yes, we're facing terrible, terrible forces of evil in this world. And there are many, many floods that are trying to flood us, but we have to be oils. And if we can be grounded in our values and shine as we are supposed to shine our Jewishness, shine the light of our soul, shine with the actions of our mitzvahs in this world, then no water will ever be able to overwhelm us and overcome us. Rather, the oil, we will always end up on top. And that's really the message of the oil. But we have to be oil in order to end up on top. We can't just be waters. If we lose ourselves, if we lose our light, that's when the danger seeps in. We have to be oil. That's message number 3. And last but not least, message number 4. And then again, I'm happy to open this up to any questions you may have on Chanukah or beyond. But this message I learned from watching the candles themselves. Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory, famously said that on Chanukah, it's not enough to light the candles, but we have to sit there and listen to the candles. Candles are speaking to us. And they share all sorts of messages, many messages that we learn from candles. One classic message, that's not the 4th lesson I was going to share, but a candle, if you look at the flame of the candle, it constantly aspires to go upwards. Now the soul, our souls, are compared to candles. King Solomon says that Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam, that the candle of God is the soul of a person. Soul of a person is compared to the candle of God. We too, our souls, constantly aspire to be connected to the divine, constantly reach for some type of higher purpose and meaning. But unfortunately, we have a wax that pulls us down. But it pulls us down not to fight us. It pulls us down to remind us that we can't just disappear. Our task is to light a flame here in the waxes of the world. So that in of itself is a message that the candles of Chanukah whisper. But there's a lesson that I think is very, very relevant for the Gaza war and for our situation altogether. That is that if you listen to the candles, you'll hear them whisper that darkness doesn't faze them at all. They are occupied solely with lighting a flame. They could be in the thickest of the darkness. You can light the menorah candle at midnight. It doesn't matter. Does it matter to the candles? Will the candles tell you, no, it's too dark for me. I'm overwhelmed by all of this. No, they occupied again with lighting. Same with us. We might face darkness, and sometimes the darkness may seem overwhelming, but we can't allow this darkness to faze us. We have to do our job. And if we do our job to light a candle of goodness in this world, the darkness will melt away. I think it's true with the fight against anti-Semitism today. Very, very often we hear Jews, and there's room for that are fighting against anti-Semitism, against this darkness. I think the best way to fight anti-Semitism is not just to fight against anti-Semitism, but it's to fight for Judaism. I think the more we enhance the flame of Judaism, the more that darkness will fade away. The more we show the world that being Jewish is being not just menschers, but it's being the carriers of the Torah torch and all of the good moral, ethical values that this world needs, the more people will say, oh, Jews are not that bad after all. And it's not enough, therefore, to know what we're fighting against. We have to know what we're fighting for. The Chanukah candles are only preoccupied with that. They know that they're fighting for light, regardless of the darkness that surrounds them. And so must we.